It's just past International Women's Day, so I thought we should talk about the biggest problem oppressing women in the West. Yes, it is of course the amount of money that they choose to spend on things that they buy. Also known as the pink tax. The pink tax is something which I have spoken about before and repeatedly debunked. It often relies on falsely comparing completely different products and claiming that they are in fact identical. And that when you go in and look at these products, the differences are quite easy to spot, often coming down to differences in ingredients between things such as soaps or deodorants, and differences in materials, styles, or cut of cloth when comparing supposedly identical clothing. And even when they find things which are legitimately identical, the only difference being colour, well, as we've mentioned, aesthetics have a value. People have a preference for things based on appearance. And that preference that they exhibit based on the appearance of something is absolutely something that you can charge for. If customers are willing to pay that little bit extra for the colour that they prefer, then you can get away with it. If the price discrepancy becomes too high, then customers will reject the difference in price. However, today I want to take the pink tax to its most base component possible, which means we're going to be looking at plastics. Today's document comes from Smithers Rapra, an industry-leading company in all things rubber and plastic, hosted on polymerjournals.com. The document in question: Developments in Colorants for Plastic. Before we go too far into this, I will have to introduce you to a few different things, the most important of which is the cooking process of plastic. In order to colour a plastic, you have to heat it up into a liquid or semi-liquid state, and then add into that either a pigment or a dye. Pigments and dyes are two different ways of colouring plastic, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, the most important of which are to do with the temperature at which your plastic has to be mixed, and the amount of time that it has to be mixed for. Too low a temperature or not enough mixing will provide an unsatisfactory finish. That is, the pigment or the dye will not be suitably dispersed throughout the plastic, and you'll end up with a lumpy, granulated appearance, with little spots of plastic that have a very high amount of colour, and then all the area in between having very little or no colour. Now there's three very important things that I need to introduce you to here: low performance application plastic, medium performance application plastic, and high performance application plastic. Low performance applications are defined in this document as requiring low temperature processing and have a low to moderate light fastness. That's basically how long the colour will last when exposed to sunlight. Medium performance application require a medium processing temperature, and high performance application require a high temperature. So as we can see, when it comes to making plastics, some will be cooked at a lower temperature than others. One of the main things that determines the temperature that you can get away with using is the kind of colorant that you're using to color your plastic. When it comes to pink coloration, which falls underneath the maroon and violet color umbrella, this document has this to say about low performance applications. Typical of the low-performance application in this colour area are pastel pink and purple colours for packaging and toys. Interestingly, there are no low-performance colorants in this part of colour space, and consequently all low-performance applications have to be coloured with either medium or high-performance products. Not surprisingly, therefore, colorant selection here is typically driven by cost and shade considerations. Putting it very simply, there is no such thing as a low-heat pink plastic. If you want to make a pink plastic, you are going to have to cook it at a higher temperature. Another interesting thing that this paper notes about the use of pink colorants is that they're generally installed in the USA, which means that they are generally used more in North America than in other places such as Europe. This market imbalance tends to mean that if you are purchasing a pink pigment for your plastic, it's going to be coming from North America, which means you're going to have to import it. But what do any of these things matter? Well, if we use the classic gender divide of pink for the girls and blue for the boys, well, let's see what this document has to say about the coloration of blue plastics. Blue is the third of the primary colours, and although it is coloristically important, there are relatively few pigments. Blue coloration is dominated by phthalocyanine chemistry. One of life's ironies is that while phthalocyanine is one of the strongest, most heat-stable, light-fast, weather-fast pigments, it is also one of the oldest and cheapest, and at 80,000 tons per year, not all of which is used for plastic, one of the biggest volume pigments in the industry. The combination of spectacular performance and very low prices for phthalocyanine changes the discussion of pigment selection from the normal question of finding a pigment whose performance can satisfy the demands of the application to one of determining whether there is any reason not to use phthalocyanine. Putting it as absolutely simply as possible, blue plastic can be manufactured incredibly cheaply. The colour is cheaper when compared to pink dyes, the colour is more readily available when compared to pink dyes, so you probably aren't going to have to import it, and then there's the crucial part: you can cook it at a lower temperature for a shorter time and still get as good a quality finish. So, let's compare it from the ground up. Let's take two hypothetical, identical products, a pink razor and a blue razor. Identical in every way, the only difference being the colour. Firstly, pink colorant is more expensive than blue colorant. Secondly, if you are choosing to use pink colorant and are outside the USA, you are almost certainly going to be paying to import that colour, whereas with blue, you'll probably find somewhere selling blue dye in your own country, thus negating import costs. 3. The plastic going into the pink razor has to be cooked at a higher temperature for longer in order to achieve a satisfactory result when compared to the blue plastic. Cooking at a higher temperature for longer requires the use of more energy, and energy is not free. Gas and electricity, the two things that you need to run the machines in order to heat up this plastic, cost money, and the more of it you use, the more you have to pay. Coming straight out of the factory, this pink razor has required more energy to create it than this blue razor. It also has, as a result, a larger carbon footprint, and has therefore been worse for the global environment. And we then have to take into account that the price differences of these plastics could also be carried over to the packaging used for these razors as well, with pink razors often coming in pink plastic packaging, whereas blue razors will come in blue razor packaging. That coloured plastic packaging is also subject to these differences in price for the plastic manufacture. And all of this happens before these products are able to be hit by the concept of supply and demand. The differences in the choices that people make regarding the aesthetics of these products. From the ground up, from the very beginning, pink plastic per pound costs more than blue plastic per pound. And yet, despite this difference, you can still often find that these things are being sold for the same price. As a result, the places selling these products are basically already taking a potential hit to their profit. And it is one that is in favour of women. But of course, we live in a society that hates women, just hates them. Which is why we have major shopping trains and even members of parliament saying that they are going to reduce the cost of women's products in order to end sexist pricing. Because the fact that from the ground up, these pink plastics are more expensive to manufacture than the blue plastics doesn't matter. We shouldn't have to take that into account. The fact that women overwhelmingly prefer to spend more money on the thing because it is pink, because they prefer the colour pink, we shouldn't have to take that into account. Women need to be exempt from the repercussions of their own choices, because to hold them accountable for their own actions is sexism. At every step of the way in this equation, women are being catered to. The environment is eating the repercussions of the extra energy that it costs to make your pink plastics. Manufacturers and suppliers are eating the extra cost of that pink plastic just so they can offer them at the same price as blue plastic, which is considerably cheaper. And on top of that, shops are bending over backwards to save you even more money on things which are completely different when compared to men's products. But society hates women. Just hates them. How could you possibly want to tax the poor women by making them have to pay for the extra cost of producing the things that they want? And that, of course, makes the assumption that they are the ones footing the bill anyway. We do, after all, have to take into account that sneaky little spending gap. The ugly younger sibling of the oft-touted wage gap that feminists and social justice warriors do not want to talk about. We've all heard the wage gap myth. A woman will earn 77 cents to a man's dollar for the exact same work, and how it is completely fraudulent, because it merely compares all women to all men, makes no allowance for differences in jobs, differences in hours worked, differences in holiday time, differences in sick time, differences in productivity, all thrown out of the window just so you can have a nice little soundbite that is completely wrong. But then we get the spending gap. We get the knowledge of the fact that women control 70 to 80% of all consumer spending. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Women are able to spend more money than they earn. I wonder where that money is coming from. I mean, if it's not women generating the money, where could it possibly be coming from? I can't think of it. It's a complete mystery to me. Who else in society is there that aren't women? God, it's just too hard for me to work out where all of that extra money that these women are spending is coming from. When it comes to the pink tax, and in this instance, the use of pink plastics compared to blue plastics, everyone else is footing the bill for women's choices already. And in the instances where that's not the case, everyone is willing to white knight and dive straight on in there and hand over their money so that women don't have to pay for their own personal choices. God damn that oppressive patriarchy making society hate women just that much.